Thank you. Hey guys, my name's Al and I am still an addict. Nice one for the lights and the Christmas tree. Me and Michelle come in here the other night for the church had a carol service, and I like a traditional carol service. It takes me back to when I was little, and Michelle said, let's go along to this venue and try that one, and we turned up. And it was really nice coming in here with the lights down. They had no big lights on, they had a few candles there, these lights and the trees. It just had a really nice, safe, homely feeling. And my belief system is quite a few degrees out of plumb. I certainly wouldn't say that it's mainstream Christian churchy, although I'm comfortable in places like that, but I felt remarkably comfortable. And it was because of this. It was because this is my home group. This is where I turn up every week, no matter what. This is where I've smiled and laughed, and I've sat with tears in my eyes, and we haven't even been here that long. And that's as a result of this. That's as a result of Cocaine Anonymous, and that's as a result of being part of the fellowship that I love and the fellowship that I crave. So, like I said, my name's Al. I'm an addict. I class myself, when I'm sat here, I don't necessarily say it when I'm sat there, but when I'm sat here, I will generally introduce myself as a recovered drug addict. And what I mean by that is, in the context of the big book, is this morning I did not wake up with the obsession to go and drink and go and use, or the obsession it talks about in the big book, the great obsession of every abnormal drinker, that one day I'll beat the game. And I know why I didn't, because I work and rework this program. And I know that I didn't because if I had of, there's no fucking way in the world I'd be sat here with you lot. Not a chance. I would be out there ruined by now. If I'd started at 9 o'clock this morning, I have no doubt by now, 8 o'clock tonight, I'd be fucked. Simple as that. Almost certainly in a police station by now. Because I was never a good criminal when I was a good criminal. And I certainly have been out of practice for a long time now. So I would wager I would be piss poor at best. So my story is, I came to Cocaine Anonymous, I came to 12-Step Fellowship, because I'd ended up in jail as a result of years of unsuccessful attempts to beat the game, to control my using. I'd ended up in jail. They said, if you get involved in recovery, you might get parole. And that's why I came here. And that's important, because I'm going to talk in a minute a little bit about the traditions rather than the steps. And what it says in the traditions is the only requirement for membership, the only requirement is this desire thing. And I got to tell you, when I came here, I barely had that. I really barely had that. And my motives were definitely not what you would say pure. My motives were, I want to get parole so I can go out and use. And despite not fulfilling that in the context of the traditions, this still worked for me. So I guess the message is, if you're here tonight, whether you're new or you've been around a long time, the desire will make things easier, but that's not the be-all and end of it. It is possible to come here and just do what we do, just follow the person in front of you, just work and rework the steps to the best of your willingness, and you'll still recover. See, because this program isn't based on your willingness. This program, working and not working, isn't based on how much I think I need this or feel I need this. This program is based on what I do. What I do, the actions I put in. And my experience is, if you put in the actions of this program, it's really, really difficult to use drugs, destroy lives and fuck over everyone close to you if you work in this program. Those two things can't operate in the same space. So I came here, I started working this. I started getting information on this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is the book that we use. If you haven't got one, get one. If you haven't worked through the steps in it, work through the steps in it. If you're not sure if it'll work or not, you don't need to take my word for it. Just try it. Just give it a go and let me know what happens. If you have done, then you don't need me to tell you. And I know plenty of people in this room have. So I came here, I started working the steps, and despite myself, despite the motives that brought me here, it started to work and my life started to change. And Cocaine Anonymous carried me long enough for me to get a sufficient spiritual awakening to be able to start trying to carry other people around me. And as a result of doing that, I've been all right for a considerable amount of time. And I followed the program. I got a sponsor and I worked through the steps. And very shortly after working through the steps, my sponsor had me looking at the traditions. And when I'd looked at the traditions, I started looking at what's called the concepts. And I learned that within our program, there are 36 principles. Now, exactly what they are so open to interpretation. You'll see different bookmarks, different literature, different bits of this, that, and the other that say this, this, and this for these principles. But what I know to be a fact is the 36 principles are linked to the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 concepts. And some of them are easy. Some of them are things like honesty, like making resolution. And some of them are up to you individually to find your way. So I want to talk a little bit tonight about the traditions. And I've looked at the traditions a lot over the years. I've probably been in more tradition study groups than step study groups. I've really pulled them apart, looked at what drives them, looked at how they were written, because I thought they were these really complex set of principles. I thought the traditions were, I knew the steps were simple and action-based, but I thought the traditions were something different to that, something more than that. I am absolutely here to report that if that is what you think, it's bollocks. Total, absolute bollocks. The traditions as a set of principles and a guidance are so simple, so straightforward, that the chances of us missing it just get higher and higher and higher. So if you're interested in traditions and you want to start looking at it, a couple of points that were really helpful to me, and I'm not going to go through each one and pull it apart and talk about the history and the Washingtonians and what Bill was doing in the early 50s as he was developing them and all of that historical stuff, which I find fascinating. But for the purpose of 20 minutes tonight is just more than we need to do. The traditions we see, every time we look at them, up there, are a bastardized version of what the traditions are. Bill Wilson did not write the traditions like that. If you want to find them, then what you do is you go to the back of the big book, you'll find these, and then directly after, you'll find what are called the long form of the traditions. See, these are just a snippet that they cut down small enough to get on a poster, on a 12 and 12 to hang up. It's like if you imagine the steps, cutting them in half with each of them, you only get half of the story. So by really simply going to the back of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and reading the long form of the traditions, it becomes so much simpler. Bill Wilson was he was a liar, a cheat, a thief, and a womanizing bastard, is the truth of it. And I identified with Bill for many years. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But one of the other things Bill was a talker and a prolific writer. And he decided that he wanted to get the traditions out to the fellowship And he just went on and on and on and prattled on and on about it, to the point that historically we know that it got to the point where if meetings were asking Bill to come and share, they would say, Bill, we'd love you to come and share, man. We'd love you to share it. But for the love of God, don't mention them damn traditions. We're sick of it. Because he was a promoter. And he wrote them all down. He wrote them in a book called The 12 and 12. And we've got 12 and 12s at the back of this meeting. 12 and 12 is a great book. The essays on the steps are almost as interesting and fascinating as on the traditions, though he only put the ones on the steps in there to pad it out because the book was too thin without them. But the essays he wrote on the traditions are all right. They're good. They've got some great stories. They're all right for study groups, but for learning to understand the traditions, if that's something you have an interest in, there is an easier or softer way. There is a more direct way and there is a more simple way. So in AA, they've got a publication called The Grapevine. So The Grapevine has been going since early AA. And it's kind of stories and letters from members of the fellowship. And Bill Wilson just wrote and wrote and wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of essays for The Grapevine. And as he was developing the traditions and getting the 12 and 12 together, he wrote very small essays on the traditions that were published in The Grapevine. And they're available in a book called The Language of the Heart. It's not CA approved literature. We don't have it here. But if you have any interest in starting to understand about the traditions, this is what I would always point someone to. The essay he wrote on the first tradition was about half a page. And most of them are like that. None of them are more than about a page and a quarter. And they're so to the point, and they're so succinct, and they're so, this is what the feel of this tradition is about. This is what the heart of this tradition is about. And what I learned from reading that and looking at that is, if I could work out that the traditions, there are things you hear, there are things I heard in fellowship that I don't agree with. There's at least 3 or 4 of them. There's possibly more. And one of them was, the steps are for you and the traditions are to protect the fellowship from you. Now I get why people say that, but that's not the truth for me. The truth for me is, the steps got me to settle, clear up my shit, and build a relationship with God, the God that I know. The traditions gave me the ability to go out into the world and play nicely with others. The concepts taught me about service. See, I was thinking and I was hearing that the traditions were all about service. The traditions are fuck all about service. The traditions are about me learning to act and interact when I go out of this door, because in here, I mean, I know most of the people in this room, and not one single one of you is what someone out there would refer to as normal. You're all a fair few degrees out of plumb at any given point. That's why I love you all, and that's why I feel comfortable and at home here. But when I go out of that door, there are things I would say to people in this room, and have done, and you do that thing. You look at me, your head tilts to one side, you smile and you identify. I say the same thing to someone out there, they edge away from me, avoiding eye contact, and pretend they've had a phone call or somebody's on, and I know there's nobody on the phone. So I needed to learn how I could act and interact in the world outside. And what the traditions gave me was the ability to be able to do that. Now, some ways were very, very simple. We talked about the 7th tradition. We talk about it at the beginning. Got to be self-supporting. It's really easy to think that's just about money. And of course, when I go out into the world, when I start living this life, I need to be self-supporting. But it's so much more than that. How am I self-supporting in all areas of my life? Because it's more than just money, and it's the same with the meetings. How do we support this meeting? We've done it tonight, Boxing Day, and everyone's turned up, and tea's been made, and biscuits are here, and the meeting's happening because we are self-supporting. So the exercise then came about the working and reworking of the steps. I have found absolutely vital to ongoing sobriety and a degree of ongoing sanity. It's a bit of a moving target. It can be up and down a bit, but a degree of it. But for me, without continuing that journey, without starting to consider that the traditions are for me as well. The traditions are for me to be able to apply in my life. The traditions are to give me yet another bunch of principles that can help me in my ongoing, I don't really want to say spiritual development, because that hints at maybe I'm spiritually developed, and I don't consider myself to be that in any shape or form, but they give me the opportunity. So I start looking at them from my point of view, 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 from my point of view. Common welfare coming first. What about unity? I start looking at it in the family or with my friends, because I still want to run the show. I still think, despite damning evidence that I know fuck all, I still think I know everything and I've got the answer to everything. My wife and my close friends, Ryan's here, for a number of years have looked for anything that finishes with al. Exceptional, this al, traditional, blah, blah. I mean, you'd be staggered. There's fucking millions. But again and again and again, we keep coming back to Google. I don't know, ask Google. And I'll at the drop of a hat come up with an answer to a question I don't even fucking understand. It's in me. This is the person I am. Because I think I'm a clever bastard. And the truth of the matter is, and I thank God for this realisation, I'm as thick as two short planks. I really, really am. And starting to understand and starting to look at things like the traditions, starting to apply points in the traditions in my day-to-day life, have consistently, we talk about it in the working of the steps, we talk about ego being an enemy, we talk about ego deflation being crucial to ongoing survival. If you have got any interest, like if it gets serious and you need to pull out the big guns and look at ego deflation, start looking at the traditions and where you can apply them to you personally. And I promise you, things will come up that you don't see. If your experience is you work the steps, you're recovered, or you work and rework the steps and that's all you want to do and that works for you, amazing. Just crack on. That is so cool. If, like me, you found as a result of going through the steps some other stuff come up, and maybe you weren't as level as you thought you were, then there's another key, another part of this puzzle in the traditions and the working of the traditions from a personal point of view. What then happens, or what then happened to me, is as a result of doing that, they come alive. See, the steps, if I sent you this book, said read the steps, and you just read the steps and don't practice them in your life, they're nothing more than an academic exercise. And there will be a benefit. But those of you who've worked and reworked the steps will understand that the benefit is minor compared to the practical application. With the traditions, it's the same. If you can look at ways to apply them in your day-to-day life, they come alive. So, the long form of the traditions is a great starting point. It really expands on them. If you want to look at a bit more, Language of the Heart is brilliant. There's a new bit of AA literature called the Plain Language Big Book, which has got a lot of stick from people who haven't fucking read it yet. And I know a lot of these people haven't read it yet, because getting hold of copies of it at the moment is very, very difficult. I have started reading it. And there's some great stuff in there about the steps, the traditions, and the concepts. There's some great stuff on the traditions, on plain language of the long form, which is really beneficial as well. Not approved by CA, I hasten to add. Not yet, anyway. And talk to people and sit down and look at these traditions together. Honestly, it was a revelation to me, the difference it made in my personal recovery by getting my head around there's more than the steps. If the steps is where you're at, this journey continues. There's much, much more to learn. And nobody in this room has to use again. Because what we know is the message of this group is that recovery is possible. The message of this group is that through the working and reworking of the 12 steps in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you can recover. You don't have to use again, and we have a solution. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for staying awake when somebody's talking about the traditions. It thrills the fuck out of me, but not everyone. And thanks for listening.
Cheers out.